I never expected to need my professional skills in my own neighborhood, but that's what happens when you live next to someone like Greg Patterson. The box of surveillance equipment sat on my desk, still factory sealed with tamper-evident tape along its edges. I ran my fingers over the packaging, considering my options. After a year of trying to be the affable new neighbor, I was about to cross a line I hadn't anticipated when I moved to Oakwood Heights. Cypher, my German shepherd, patted across the hardwood floor of my home office and pressed his muzzle against my leg. I scratched behind his ears, grateful he'd been found wandering only 2 blocks away after someone had left my backyard gate wide open last week. "Not an accident, was it, boy?" I murmured. The coincidences had piled up too high to ignore. First the rejected solar panel application, then the mysterious water shutoff, followed by Cypher's escape, and finally my custom mailbox, a gift from my former colleagues, crushed beyond repair. The timing was too perfect, the pattern too clear. Opening my laptop, I pulled up the email Greg had sent following my application. "Mr. Morgan, the Homeowners Association has reviewed your request for rooftop solar installation and found it does not comply with Bylaw 7.3 regarding neighborhood aesthetic continuity. Your application is therefore denied." The reply I'd sent, requesting the specific portion of the bylaw that prohibited solar panels, had gone unanswered. When I'd brought printed copies of state laws protecting homeowners' rights to renewable energy installations to the monthly meeting, Greg had been prepared. The meeting room in the community center was smaller than I'd expected, with dark walnut paneling that made it feel even more cramped. About 20 homeowners sat in metal folding chairs arranged in neat rows, most looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. "Mr. Morgan," Greg had announced when I raised my hand during the open forum, "I understand you're new to our community, but Oakwood Heights has maintained its distinctive character for 15 years under my leadership." He tapped his copy of the bylaws. Section 7.3 clearly states that modifications visible from the street must maintain the architectural cohesion of the neighborhood. "Solar panels wouldn't be visible from the street," I'd pointed out. "My roof has a rear-facing southern exposure." Greg's perfect smile hadn't wavered, but I noticed how his jaw muscles tightened. "The board's decision is final, unless you wish to resubmit with alterations." Several neighbors had turned to look at me with interest. An older woman with silver hair had even nodded slightly, as if encouraging me to continue. Instead, I'd chosen to research. That's what I do. Dig through digital evidence until I find patterns that others miss. It's made me successful in cybersecurity, and it would help me here. 3 days after the meeting, I'd returned from a conference in Boston to find my water turned off. The utility company's representative sounded confused when I called. "According to our records, someone manually closed the valve at the street," she'd said. But it wasn't one of our technicians. I'd thanked her and hung up, a slow realization forming as I recalled seeing Greg watching from his driveway when I loaded my suitcase into the car 3 days earlier. The next incident came 5 days later when Cypher disappeared through a gate I was certain I'd secured. Then the crushed mailbox, looking as though it had been hit with something heavy and deliberate. Each time I'd grown more certain of the connection, but I needed proof. When I requested access to the neighborhood security camera footage, Greg's response had been immediate and practiced. "Unfortunately, the cameras covering your section were deactivated during our recent budget restructuring," he explained, his voice carrying just the right note of regret. "The board decided to prioritize the main entrance and community center." "What about the system logs?" I asked. "Those would show exactly when the cameras went offline." Greg's expression tightened for just a second. "Our system automatically purges logs after 7 days. Budget software maintenance decision. I voted against it, but was overruled." I'd nodded as if accepting this explanation, but my mind was already cataloging the lie. Any decent security system retains logs for at least 30 days, and the high-end setup I'd noticed at the community center entrance would likely keep them for 90. More importantly, automatic purging of security logs would violate basic compliance standards for insurance coverage. That evening, I'd walk Cypher around the neighborhood, taking note of camera placements and blind spots. When we passed Greg's house, immaculate except for the Christmas light hook still attached to his gutters and the faded wreath behind his glass storm door, he'd emerged to water plants that didn't need watering. "Evening, Morgan," he called. "Everything all right with your plumbing now?" I'd kept walking, the deliberate emphasis in his question confirming what I already suspected. Now, Sitting in my office with the surveillance equipment before me, I made my decision. I opened the safe hidden in my floor and retrieved additional tools I hadn't used since leaving my position at the cybersecurity firm. There was a certain comfort in handling familiar equipment: packet sniffers, signal boosters, and a modified tablet with custom software I'd written myself. Greg Patterson had picked the wrong person to target. He thought he was dealing with just another homeowner who would eventually give up and fall in line. But his systematic harassment had shifted something in me. This wasn't just about solar panels anymore. I plugged in one of the devices and began calibrating it. On my computer screen, networks appeared, including the surprisingly robust setup labeled HOA admin, exactly what I'd expected to find. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Don't give up on the solar panels. Others are watching too. E." I glanced out my window toward the homes across the cul-de-sac, wondering which of my neighbors had sent the message. The silver-haired woman from the meeting, perhaps? Cypher settled at my feet as I began to work. The counter-surveillance operation would need to be meticulous. I'd start by documenting Greg's digital presence, then establish a secure monitoring system around my property. If Greg was accessing neighborhood security systems inappropriately, he'd leave traces no matter how careful he thought he was being. I created a new encrypted folder labeled Oakwood and began my documentation with screenshots of the rejected application and subsequent correspondence. This would take time and patience, qualities I had in abundance when pursuing something important. If Greg Patterson thought Christmas decorations in April were acceptable, but solar panels weren't, he was about to learn some hard lessons about consistency and consequences. For 2 weeks, my dining room table disappeared under an expanding collection of evidence against Greg Patterson. What had started as a simple counter-surveillance operation had transformed into something far more extensive and disturbing. My laptop screen glowed in the dim light as I tracked a familiar digital signature moving through the neighborhood's security system. 3 in the morning, and Greg was at it again, remotely accessing cameras he'd claimed were deactivated. I recorded the timestamp and added it to my log, his 5th unauthorized access this week. "Got you," I muttered as I captured the moment he deleted footage from the camera overlooking my driveway. Cypher raised his head from his bed in the corner, ears perked momentarily before settling back down. He'd grown accustomed to my odd hours over the past fortnight. What Greg didn't know, couldn't know, was that I'd set up a parallel system that captured everything before he could erase it. My background in digital forensics had finally found a practical application in suburban warfare. I stretched and walked to the coffee maker. Sleep had become a luxury, but the case was taking shape. This wasn't just about me anymore. The evidence told a much bigger story. The wall beside my dining table held a map of Oakwood Heights, with red pins marking properties where homeowners had challenged Greg's authority over the past 5 years. I tracked down these former residents through property records and social media, piecing together a pattern that was too consistent to be coincidence. The Ramirez's on Elmwood Drive had wanted to build a small greenhouse. After 6 months of escalating accidents and harassment, they sold their home at a 15% loss to Martin Delford, Greg's cousin. Thomas Chen, no relation to the DA, had applied to open a home-based accounting practice. After his car was vandalized twice and his mail repeatedly went missing, he sold to Rebecca Patterson, Greg's second cousin, at 12% below market. The Johnsons had requested permission for an in-law suite addition. After mysterious water damage and multiple rejected permits, they sold to another Delford family member. All 3 properties were renovated and flipped within months for substantial profits. I clicked through property records on my second monitor, confirming the connection between sales dates and the HOA meeting minutes where these homeowners had challenged Greg. The pattern was unmistakable. My phone buzzed with a text from Ellen Jenkins, the silver-haired board member who'd sent me the encouraging message weeks ago. "Found anything useful in those old meeting minutes I sent?" I typed back. "More than useful. We need to talk before tomorrow's meeting. Coffee at 10? "Perfect. The cafe on Madison." I returned to my evidence compilation. The most damning discovery had come 3 days ago when I'd managed to intercept Greg's financial transfers. The Premier Landscaping Solutions that received hefty payments from HOA funds wasn't just overpriced, it barely existed. The shell company traced back to an LLC registered to a vacation property in Aspen, Colorado. Property tax records confirmed the owner, Gregory Patterson. I'd created a presentation that laid everything out chronologically. The harassment campaign against me captured on my own surveillance equipment, the pattern of targeting other homeowners, and the financial fraud that had cost every resident thousands in inflated HOA fees. My cell phone rang shortly after 8 in the morning. DHN's name appeared on the screen. "Morning, Alex. Are we still on for this evening?" I switched the phone to speaker as I continued organizing my files. "Yes, everything's ready. Did you review what I sent?" I did. It's more than enough for criminal charges. Her voice carried the measured precision I'd come to appreciate. "But I agree with your approach. Present it to the board first for maximum community impact. I've arranged for officers to be nearby, ready to move in after your presentation. And if he tries to interrupt or shut it down, the evidence speaks for itself. Just make sure you have backups of everything and maybe arrive early to check the technical setup." She paused. "Have you noticed any more activity around your property?" I glanced at my security feeds. "Nothing direct. He's being careful now. Mostly digital access attempts." "Good. Keep your head down until tonight. We want him completely unprepared." After ending the call, I packed my equipment methodically: laptop, backup drives, 2 different presentation remotes in case one mysteriously failed, and hard copies of key documents. Greg would undoubtedly try to interrupt or claim technical difficulties when he realized what was happening. I checked and rechecked everything. The case needed to be airtight. Not just for me, but for everyone who'd been bullied out of their homes and the entire community that had been funding Greg's Colorado getaways. At 11, I met Ellen at the cafe on Madison Street. The small coffee shop sat just outside Oakwood Heights, away from prying eyes. Ellen was already at a corner table when I arrived, a steaming mug between her hands. "Good morning, Alex," she said, her eyes bright with anticipation. "You look like someone who hasn't slept in days." "Sleep is overrated," I replied, setting my tablet on the table. "I wanted to give you a preview of what's coming tonight." Ellen pushed her glasses higher on her nose as I slid the tablet toward her. I've suspected something wasn't right for years, but Greg always had explanations, and the financial reviews were so superficial. "That was by design," I said. "Look at this." I showed her the evidence of Greg's systematic targeting of homeowners and the financial trail leading to his shell company. Her expression hardened with each slide. "This is far worse than I imagined," she said finally. "The board will have no choice but to act. 3 of us have been suspicious, but we needed solid evidence. You'll have it tonight. Just make sure I get my 10 minutes during new business." "I'll ensure it," Ellen promised. "Greg won't be able to shut this down." I returned home and spent the afternoon doing final prep for the meeting. Cypher stuck close to my side, sensing my tension. At one point, I stepped outside to get the mail and felt eyes on me. Looking up, I caught Greg watching from an upstairs window of his house across the street. When our eyes met, he smiled and waved as if we were the friendliest of neighbors. The casual confidence in that wave sent a chill through me. He had absolutely no idea what was coming in just 6 hours. His 15-year reign over Oakwood Heights was about to end. I gave him a nod and went back inside, checking my watch. The quarterly HOA meeting would start at 7. I planned to arrive by 6 to set up and ensure there would be no last-minute technical difficulties. As I did a final review of my presentation, I thought about how Greg had consistently underestimated me from the moment I moved in. He'd seen a new homeowner to intimidate, not a forensic cybersecurity specialist who documented everything. That mistake would cost him tonight, and I couldn't wait to see his face when he realized exactly what he was up against. I arrived at the community center a full hour before the 7 p.m. meeting. The parking lot was empty, except for the maintenance worker's truck. Perfect. I needed time to set up without interruptions or last-minute surprises from Greg. The meeting room looked exactly as it had during my first confrontation with Greg. Dark walnut paneling, uncomfortable metal folding chairs arranged in rows, and a small projector screen at the front. The setting felt appropriate. What had started in this room would end here too. I pulled out my laptop and connected it to the projector, testing the display with my backup presentation copy. Then I connected a second hidden device under the table that would record everything and stream it to a secure server. If Greg tried to claim later that the evidence was doctored, I'd have the raw meeting footage as backup. "You're here early." The voice came from the doorway. Ellen Jenkins stood with a leather portfolio under her arm, her silver bob neat as always. She glanced at my technical setup with approval. "Wanted to make sure everything works," I said, running through one last display test. "Smart. Greg usually has Martin arrive early to check the equipment, which somehow results in technical problems for anyone presenting against his interests." I nodded. "Not tonight." Ellen moved closer, lowering her voice. "3 board members are solidly with us. That's majority vote if we need immediate action. Are you ready?" "More than ready." I continued setting up as Ellen arranged her materials at the board table. Slowly, other homeowners began to trickle in, filling the metal chairs with the reluctant energy of people fulfilling an obligation. Some nodded to me, curious about my presence at the front of the room. I'd made sure to dress professionally tonight. Charcoal slacks, blue button-down, no tie. Casual enough to belong, but formal enough to command attention. At 6:55, Greg Patterson strode through the door like he owned the building. In a way, I supposed he did. His silver hair caught the fluorescent lighting as he nodded to several residents, clearly his reliable supporters. He paused when he saw me at the front, my laptop connected to the projector. "Alex?" he said, my name sounding strange in his mouth. "Setting up for something?" "Just a brief presentation during new business." I kept my tone neutral, watching his face for any reaction. "Interesting." His eyes narrowed slightly. "I don't recall seeing that on the agenda." "Ellen added it yesterday," I replied. "Property security concerns." Something flickered across his face. Uncertainty, perhaps, or the first hint of worry, but it vanished quickly behind his practiced smile. "Well, we'll see if we have time. Busy agenda tonight." He moved to the front table where the other board members were gathering. I noticed him whispering something to Martin Delford, who kept glancing in my direction. Too late for their usual tactics. Everything was already in place. The meeting began at 7:05 with standard formalities: approval of previous minutes, treasurer's report, which now took on new meaning given what I knew about the financial fraud, and committee updates. I sat quietly, my composure intact. This wasn't my first high-stakes presentation. Years of briefing executives and federal agents on security breaches had prepared me for moments like this. Throughout the routine business, I noticed Greg checking his watch repeatedly, rushing through agenda items faster than usual. Was he hoping to cut the meeting short before my presentation? Ellen caught my eye and gave a nearly imperceptible nod. She was watching him too. Finally, after 45 minutes of the usual HOA tedium, Ellen announced, "That concludes our standard business. Moving on to new business. I believe Alex Morgan has requested 10 minutes to address property security concerns." Greg leaned forward. "Actually, given the time, perhaps we should defer any new presentations to next month. We still have the landscaping contract to review." "The landscaping contract can wait," Ellen said firmly. "Mr. Morgan's concerns are time-sensitive and relate directly to community safety." 2 other board members nodded in agreement. Greg's jaw tightened as he realized he was outnumbered. "Fine," he said, leaning back. 10 minutes. The room quieted as I stood and moved to the front. About 30 homeowners watched with varying degrees of interest as I connected my presentation remote. "Thank you for your time tonight," I began. "I moved to Oakwood Heights last year looking for a quiet community to call home. Unfortunately, what I found instead was something deeply troubling." I clicked to the first slide. The black and white night vision video played clearly on the screen. Greg Patterson, unmistakable even in the darkness, crouching beside my water main with a specialized key tool, deliberately shutting off the valve. The timestamp matched exactly with my business trip to Boston. A murmur rippled through the audience. Greg sat perfectly still, but I could see the color beginning to drain from his face. "This is just one example of targeted harassment I've documented over the past several months," I continued, advancing through slides showing clear evidence of Greg tampering with my mail, opening my backyard gate, and accessing security cameras he claimed were deactivated. But this isn't just about me. I moved to the next section of my presentation. After experiencing these incidents, I began to research other homeowners who had conflict with the HOA under Mr. Patterson's leadership. I displayed the neighborhood map with red pins marking properties that had been sold under duress. These homes share a pattern. Each owner requested reasonable property modifications, was systematically harassed until they sold at below market rates, and their properties were subsequently purchased by members of Mr. Patterson's family. The room had gone completely silent. Even Greg's usual supporters were watching with stunned expressions. But the most serious issue affects every homeowner in this room. I clicked to the financial evidence. For the past 7 years, Oakwood Heights has paid Premier Landscaping Solutions significantly above market rates for basic services. This company appears legitimate on paper, but financial records show it's a shell corporation. I displayed the bank transfers, property records, and LLC registration documents. The money paid to this company traces directly to a property in Aspen, Colorado, owned by Gregory Patterson. The final slide showed the total: $347,000 in HOA funds diverted over 7 years, approximately $3,200 from each household in the room. This evidence has been shared with the district attorney's office, I concluded. I'm presenting it to the community first because you deserve to know. Nobody spoke while I concluded my presentation. Then Greg shot to his feet. This is absurd! Completely fabricated! His controlled demeanor had cracked. Morgan has clearly doctored these images because I rejected his solar panels. Ellen stood. The evidence appears quite detailed, Greg. Would you care to explain the bank transfers? I don't have to explain anything. This is slander. Greg lunged toward the projector table, reaching for my laptop. 2 neighbors, Mark Stevenson and Bill Tucker, moved with surprising speed, placing themselves between Greg and the equipment. Don't make this worse, Greg, Mark said quietly. The door at the back of the room opened and 3 police officers entered. D.A. Chen stood behind them, perfectly timing her arrival as we had discussed. The officers moved directly toward Greg, whose face now held the dawning realization that his carefully constructed world was collapsing. Gregory Patterson, the lead officer said, "We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of fraud, embezzlement, and criminal harassment." This is ridiculous! Greg's voice rose as the officers approached. Do you know who I am? Who my golf partners are? This won't stand. As the officers led him toward the door, he twisted back to face the room. I'll sue everyone involved. I have connections you can't imagine. You'll regret this. His threats hung in the stunned silence as he was escorted out. Through the open door, I could see him being placed in a police cruiser, still protesting loudly. D.A. Chen nodded to me from the doorway, then followed the officers outside. After a long stretch of silence, Ellen cleared her throat. In light of these revelations, I move that we immediately approve Alex Morgan's solar panel application, which was improperly rejected, and launch a full independent audit of all HOA finances. The vote was unanimous. The meeting adjourned shortly after, breaking into clusters of shocked conversations. Neighbors who had never spoken to me approached with questions, comments, and in some cases, additional information about their own experiences with Greg. I answered as best I could while packing up my equipment. Ellen touched my arm as I prepared to leave. That took courage and thoroughness. It took evidence, I replied. People like Greg count on others not keeping records. Outside, the early summer evening was mild with a slight breeze. I walked home under the streetlights, noticing how neighbors nodded or waved as I passed, small gestures that carried new respect. My phone buzzed with a text from Chen. Charges filed, arraignment tomorrow, nice work. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, feeling the weight of the past few weeks finally lifting. Cypher would be waiting at home, probably wondering why I smelled like tension and adrenaline. Tomorrow I'd call about getting those solar panels installed. Tonight I'd finally get some proper sleep. The streetlights illuminated houses that suddenly seemed freed from an invisible burden. Homes in a neighborhood that might actually become the community I'd hoped for when I first moved in.